Hello everyone and welcome back to the Sports with Frank podcast, another NBA episode. Today we're going to be going over those matchups that we haven't covered in the last episode, last Wednesday. So the second half of the projected playoff picture if the NBA were to decide to go for the top 16 teams rather than top 8 in the West and top 8 in the East. So we're going to be talking about that and going to go into a bit more detail about every single matchup. So let's dive right into it. This is the Sports with Frank podcast. I'm Francesco. Let's do this. Here we go, another week of NBA news. Nothing really about the restart of the season. It seems like it's probably going to be around August and it's going to be in Orlando like we talked about before, with Disney World Park being the main location for every game, but nothing official yet. So we're gonna stick with what I believe would be the most interesting format for the NBA return. So no more regular season, just straight into the playoffs, top 16 teams by record. We talked about the first 4 matchups in last week's episode, so you can go and check that out if you haven't. And today we're gonna be diving into the other 4, which also contain my favorite team, the Celtics. So, spoiler alert, I'm going to be biased in that one. But as always, I'm going to try and be, even with my basketball faith that's going to play a part, I'm going to try and be as objective as I can. So let's dive in right away with the first matchup. That's the Toronto Raptors against the Memphis Grizzlies. Now, this one, it's another one of these, top seed against lower down seed. Raptors are right now the 3rd team in the NBA by record. The Grizzlies will be the 14th. But it's a very interesting matchup in the sense that on one hand you have a team that's been, underlooked all season. The Raptors are NBA champions. Until the next finals they will be NBA champions, and I believe they deserve more respect. I talk about the Raptors a bit during my awards prediction show, where I pointed out that in my opinion Nick Nurse is the coach of the year for the current NBA season because what he managed to do with his team. This is a team that lost Kawhi Leonard, one of the best players in the NBA. Some people have it top 3, some people have it top 2, but nonetheless definitely an elite player in the game of basketball today. And then they also lost Danny Green, that of course is not as shiny of a name as Kawhi Leonard, but it's a guy that has won championships in 2 different places. It's a guy that can defend at high level every position, and it can also he also gets buckets a lot. That's a guy that from 3 is a deadly weapon, and he showed that in the final last year as well against Golden State. So those are 2 players that they leave your team and they definitely leave holes in there. The Raptors, even without signing any particular free agent over the summer, they managed to stay relevant and they managed to be a good basketball team. They play good basketball, and that's because Nick Nurse managed to replace the production that Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green gave them with more than 2 players. OJ Anunoby, a guy that last year didn't really have much of a role, he stepped in and he played very well. They had a bunch of G League guys. The role of Fred VanVleet improved even more compared to last season, even though it was definitely a factor in the playoffs. Now he's one of the main guys in this team. And then of course Pascal Siakam has stepped it up even more for a guy that already won Most Improved Player last year, and as I talked about in the same award show, he's a guy that could actually be taken into consideration for this year's award as well. And overall this is a team that has everything it takes to go deep in the playoffs. If the playoffs were East against West, I could actually see the Toronto Raptors being a factor, an interesting team even for a place in the final. I know that they should probably beat Milwaukee to get there, but they would have been an interesting team to consider as a possible surprise to get to the finals. Now, in this matchup, I think they have the edge. But on the other end, you have the Memphis Grizzlies, a team that, last year was one of the worst teams in the NBA. Of course, they picked 2nd in the draft. They picked John Morant, which in my opinion is the Rookie of the Year hands down, and it's honestly impressive what he's been able to do. He's been able to take a team that, as I said, last year wasn't really good at all. They had a lot of players there. They traded away Marc Gasol at the trade deadline in February to the Raptors. They had Mike Conley that was always injured. It was traded as well this summer to the Utah Jazz. So they rebuilt. But the rebuild is going very well because so far they've been proving that you can actually be competitive in the NBA, even having the majority of your players being young players without really a clear leader in there. This is a team that they have Morant, as I said, but they also have other interesting players like Dylan Brooks, a guy that in my opinion has a pretty high ceiling. I don't see him to get to superstar stardom, but I think he's going to be a very solid piece for teams that want to compete for the foreseeable future. And then, of course, they traded away Andre Iguodala at the trade deadline this year to bring in another guy that's a very interesting player, especially for his ability to play different positions, and that Justice Winslow. Winslow came over from Miami, where he started playing point guard last year. And he comes into a team that already has that kind of player in John Morant, the guy that brings the ball up the court and is able to dish away assists, but also attack the bucket really well. So you add another guy with playmaker ability that allows John Morant to be, to have a scheme that favors him to go towards the basket more than, helping other players getting there. Because when you have Winslow, you have a guy on the wing that can actually play the ball like a point guard, and he proved that he can do that pretty well in Miami. So this is a team that overall has a lot of young talent and pieces. Of course, Double J Jackson that was drafted a couple of years ago. Another important piece is the modern center, and I think the combo of him and Morant, surrounded by this young talent, is gonna bring a lot of success to Memphis. I don't know if they can win titles in the foreseeable future. It all depends on how well they can build around these two guys. But overall, this is a team that could be a surprise in these playoffs. Now, I think being the Raptors, the team that's gonna be facing the Grizzlies, the importance of Nick Nurse in this team, as I said, is undeniable. And I think in a series, especially against a young team like this, Nick Nurse could actually manage to shut down their top pieces and get the Raptors over to the next round. So interesting series for sure, but I think this is probably going to end up being a 4-1 win for the Toronto Raptors that will advance to the next round. Now let's move to the next matchup here, and that's another Western Conference against Eastern Conference team. This is the Denver Nuggets, number 6 seed at the moment, against the Indiana Pacers, number 11 seed. Now the Pacers are a team that it's number 11 in this hypothetical playoffs matchup, but in my opinion they have the talent to be a much higher team. They are, in my opinion, a much better team, a team that has a lot of young pieces but with a lot of experience, because if you look at their roster, they have Malcolm Brogdon, a guy that's relatively new to the NBA, but he came in quite old already, so he has already a lot of games under his belt between college at Virginia and then with the Bucks, where he won Rookie of the Year a couple of years ago. And now with the Pacers, he comes in and he's honestly, he's been playing out of his mind. This is a guy that's been able to take over a team that for the majority of the season didn't have his best player in Victor Oladipo, and they didn't really feel the absence of Oladipo at all. I mean, they struggled at the beginning, but they managed to come back strong, and they were doing pretty well before the All-Star break. And of course, like you brought in TJ Warren from the Suns, a guy that was under the radar a lot because of the fact that he played in Phoenix, but he showed that he can actually go and score. Now he cannot do much more, but it's a pretty good scorer for a team like this that without Oladipo actually needed someone on the wing that could get baskets and be a threat at all times. And then of course they have this twin towers up front with Domantas Sabonis and Miles Turner. Those are two bigs that they didn't think could coexist together. That's why at the beginning of the season there were talks of Sabonis probably being shipped away because he had, his rookie contract was coming to an end, and they wanted to get something back from him because they didn't think he could actually play in the same front court as Miles Turner. But he actually proved this season that he could, and good for the Pacers that eventually decided to extend him without going for a trade. They extended the guy, and he's now been performing incredibly well. He went to the All-Star game, was a reserve, but nonetheless, this is a guy that was traded away by Orlando on draft night to the OKC Thunder, and then from the Thunder, he was in the deal that brought Paul George over to Oklahoma. So, in two teams already didn't believe in him, and I think that's a chip on his shoulder, and he's showing now that he can actually play in the NBA. Of course, his dad used to play in the NBA as well, so he comes in with that bloodline, and he has a lot to prove, in my opinion, and he's proving that extremely well so far. It's double-double machine, and again, it can coexist very well with Miles Turner, because Sabonis is more of an offensive big man, while Turner is a very, very good defensive player. So together they form an extremely interesting frontcourt and very young, and I believe that the Indiana Pacers will actually benefit from not trading Sabonis away and keeping him over, especially because his contract is not as big as it could have been if they didn't extend before the season and waited until the end, when it would have been a restricted free agents in free agency this summer, and they would have had to match any other offer. And after a season like this, the offers could have been much higher than what they paid him in the first place. So great move there. And as I said, they didn't have Oladipo for the majority of this season, but Oladipo has been back. Oladipo is, he had a pretty big injury. He came back right before the All-Star break. He was trying to ease back in the team because this is a team that's been doing well without him. So the chemistry there had to be changed in order for Oladipo to fit in that system. And he was starting to show signs to be, to get back to where he was before his injury. So this is a team that's probably going to benefit a lot by this long break that the NBA had to go through due to the virus, because now Oladipo is probably back in his best shape, and he's going to try and get back in that team to fit the game plan that they've had all season. On the other hand, you have the Denver Nuggets. The Nuggets are a team that for years now have been so consistent, year in, year out, especially during the regular season. However, they never managed to get that extra push to be extra competitive in the playoffs. This is a team that has, of course, Nikola Jokic, one of my favorite players to watch, because this is a big man that can do it all, triple-double machine, and at his size, the ability he has to take the ball and carry it up the court and dish assists left and right, and all the no-look passes. I mean, incredible player. Honestly, if you've never seen a guy play, please go and watch some of his tape, because he's incredible. But the problem with the Nuggets is that he's the only really elite player in that team. Like, the second best player in this team is Jamal Murray, which I think in a championship team he could be maybe a third guy, but I don't think he has what it takes to be a second guy in a team that wants to compete. I think the rest of the team around him is pretty good. They brought in Grant from Oklahoma. He's been pretty solid as a power forward. Of course, they have Gary Harris, a guy that instead has kind of disappointed. He came out of Michigan State a few years ago, and it was considered to be a pretty good talent. And even his first seasons with the Nuggets, he showed that he could actually play pretty well. But I think he's been overshadowed by Murray, and I wouldn't be surprised if they decide to trade him away at the end of the season. Well, overall, it's a pretty good team. Mike Malone is a good coach. He managed to create a pretty good chemistry going on in that team. So, a team that you have to be looking for when you're looking for teams that can contend. But to be honest, in this series, even though the difference in record is much higher than what I would expect at the beginning of the season, I think the Pacers will actually win this series if it were to be played. And I think a 4-2 victory for the Pacers will be in the books for this particular matchup. Matchup number 3 of the day, and this one is a nice one, because this one is the Los Angeles Clippers at number 4 seed right now against the Mavericks at number 13. Now this is interesting because the Mavericks are a team that have probably the most exciting young players in the NBA, maybe with Zion. But to be honest, I think what Luka Doncic can do for the Mavs has a much higher ceiling than what Zion could ever do with the Pelicans, because Zion is a great player athletically, but when I watch him play, I'm always scared that the guy's gonna blow out his knee at any moment. He goes up, dunks everything he sees, and I don't think that's a style of basketball that can allow you to be consistent and be on the court for 10 years, 10 to 12, 15 years. But if you look at Doncic, this is a guy that can do it all. He's a guy, at his age, is impressive, the kind of leadership he has, but it's not surprising because this is a guy that's been playing in Europe for a long time and not for any crappy team in the third division in Croatia, but it's a guy that's been playing and winning titles and winning, individual titles for Real Madrid, one of the best European basketball teams there is. Playing in the EuroLeague against much, older competition makes you, develop into a kind of player that can step in the NBA and be an impactful player right away. That never happens for rookies unless they're called LeBron James. This is a league where rookies struggle a lot at the beginning of their time in the league, but then, eventually the good ones develop into better players. But when you have a guy that steps in like he did last year, I think it's not undeniable that he's going to be one of the most impactful players in this game. And of course, over the summer, they brought in Kristaps Porzingis, which, before his injury in New York, he was being dominant. It was actually, it was early in the season, but it was considered possibly as an MVP candidate because the guy was amazing. It was double-double machine, scoring 20 plus a game. It was unbelievable. He got injured, ACL. We all know how that kind of injury, especially in basketball, could be, a big factor in in the way you return to play after the recovery. And you can tell already that Porzingis is not at a level he was before the injury still, even after playing, overall more than half a season, almost a full season with the Mavs. But I think for the style he has, and also the mentality of European players, I think he can adapt to change his game to fit with Luka and be able to actually, be a consistent and impactful player for the Mavs for many years. Because American players, for all the athleticism they have and all the flashes they have, but what they lack compared to European players is the ability to adapt their game in the long run. The only few players that have been doing that are like LeBron James, because the guy is a monster, so of course he will adapt, and that's a guy that works on himself so much. But there is plenty of occasions where teams, they have players that maybe get an injury like that and never come back as strong as they were before. An example is Blake Griffin. Blake Griffin is a guy that before getting injured, he could do all the dunks in the world. He could be an impactful player on the offensive side of the ball. And now he's come back with a huge contract and he hasn't been nearly as impactful. And I don't think he ever will go back to that level because the injuries sustained are not going to allow him to be as explosive as he was. With Porzingis instead, especially with his long range, the ability to shoot the basketball very well for a big man of his size, I think he can adapt extremely well. And I think he understands that he has to take a step back in the role that he has on the team in order to be successful. And this is a team that just put two guys and a surrounding cast of, average players, young players. They could do very well, in my opinion, not just this season and in the playoffs, but even going forward with these two at the helm. And then you have the Clippers, a team that decide to, go all out. This is a team that for years they had Lob City, Chris Paul, DeAndre Jordan, Blake Griffin, we already talked about. A team that was flashy as hell. A team that was fun to watch. Chris Paul, put the ball up and having someone dunk so hard they could break the basketball, right? But that didn't work out. They didn't manage to get to a conference finals in the first place. They started with much higher expectations. And overall, it was a team that lost their way because they started trading away. First, they traded away Chris Paul. Jordan was let go in free agency. Then Blake Griffin left to go to Detroit. And it was a team that really, didn't have a star per se in their ranks at the beginning of last year. The best player probably for what he had done in the NBA was Danilo Gallinari, but nobody believed that they could do anything, meaningful in the whole season going forward. However, Doc Rivers showed why he's one of the best coaches in the NBA, and he managed to take this group of people, led by Lou Williams, Danilo Gallinari, and Patrick Beverley, guys there are not really superstars in this league, and they were at some point, top of the Western Conference. They ended up making the playoffs. They didn't do as well as they wanted to, but I think they did way more than everybody expected from them. And then they had this young kid in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. We talked about him last week, talking about the Thunder. They also showed that he could play in the NBA. However, this summer they said, we're in LA, we want to be the team in LA, and to do so we need superstars. So what did? They traded away the majority of these players that were making, they made an impact in that team last year, in Gallinari and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, they were sent to Oklahoma. They brought in Paul George, and then they signed Kawhi Leonard in free agency, a guy who just won a Finals MVP. So this is a team that has everything it takes to be in the finals this year already, because you have these two stars, and then you have Montrezl Harrell, an incredible center, a very modern kind of player. He's going to get paid big time this summer. We'll see if the Clippers manage to retain him. I don't know what's going to happen there, but nonetheless, it's been very impactful for them. Then, as I said, Patrick Beverley, a guy that gives everything on the court, a guy that can play defense on every position. I think he's a bit overrated in his defensive skills. I think it's more like he is known as a good defender, so people believe everything he does is incredibly defensively. I think he's pretty good. I don't think he's as great as people make it look like, but I think in this team he gives exactly what they need on defense. Then Lou Williams, the guy that's been doing this for ages, coming off the bench, 20 points a game. So this is a complete team. They have a deep, complete team. They brought in even Morris from New York at the trade deadline. This is a team that has everything. So they go into this matchup against the Mavs with all the favors possible. They are favored 100%. I think they will win, but I don't think it's going to be as easy as the records could tell you. Because Luka Doncic is a guy that knows how to play in these kind of games, and he's going to show up, and he's going to, show the world what he can do. Because the Mavs are not a team that's on national TV that much, so I think a lot of people will be surprised by how good this guy is at his age. So at the end of all, I would say Clippers win this, but I think we could go to a Game 7. I say Clippers win 4-3. And now let's get to the final one. And this one is dear to my heart. This is the Celtics that are currently number 5 in the rankings against the 76ers that are number 12. Now, as a Celtics fans, I hate the Sixers, okay? I hate the way they talk about their team, the way they hype it up. And I think that, this year, when we started it all, they were pretty convinced this team was going to lead the Eastern Conference and go to the finals. And I think they believed they could win the title, especially because when Golden State is not around, everybody believes they have a shot, right? This is a team that, of course, they brought in Harris last year. They had Orford coming over free agency this summer. And, their starting five was pretty insane, especially for the length they could put on the court. They had the point guard is Ben Simmons, that's a guy that used to play power forward. Jason Richardson, they brought in from Miami, another incredible defensive player, long arms. Harris, Horford, and Embiid. So this is a team that on paper had everything to be extremely successful. The only thing they're lacking is a freaking coach. Look, Brown is a good coach, okay? He was there through the hard times, the tanking, and the trust the process part of this franchise history. But they have to realize that they cannot win with Brett Brown being their coach. I don't know, especially when they come from the Greg Popovich tree. Usually coaches are extremely well prepared to adapt to different situations. For some reason, Brett Brown is the odd man out. I don't think he can adapt to the kind of players he has. And also, this is a team that it could be very efficient in 2005 basketball. I don't think it can be as efficient today because they have nobody that can shoot the ball. The best shooter they have is Tobias Harris, which is a decent shooter. Richardson can shoot the ball sometimes, but if you're expecting Joel Embiid to have 40% from three, you're wrong. Ben Simmons doesn't even shoot threes in the first place, and I think this team was overrated at the beginning of the season and was overrated by everybody. I include myself when I say that I thought the Sixers could have been actually much better than they have been so far. But they haven't. And a team like this, over the years, especially in the playoffs, it's a team that has been using a lot their home court advantage. The fans have always made sure that the team was helped when they were playing in Philadelphia Wells Fargo Center. And in this kind of playoffs that we'll see, or whatever comes back, whatever league, regular season, playoff games, there's not going to be any fan. And I think that's going to be extremely problematic for the Sixers to perform because they're not a good road team in the first place. And if their home games are without fans, I think they're going to be affected by it more than any other team in the NBA. On the other hand, of course, my beloved Boston Celtics. This is a team that I'm telling you, we have it all. No, I'm joking. Like, it's a good team, okay? The Celtics made a mistake by trading for Kyrie a couple of years ago. And the mistake is not going to haunt them like other teams that maybe just, they mortgage their future to get a star like they did. The Clippers, if Kawhi Leonard doesn't work out and he leaves in 2 years, they gave away 1,000 draft picks. The Celtics didn't do that. They gave away 1 draft pick, they gave away Crowder, and they gave away Isaiah Thomas. Now, Thomas, when traded to the Cavs, he was an actual MVP contender the year before. He came out an incredible season. The Celtics went to the Eastern Conference Finals. They were beaten by LeBron, but that LeBron was unstoppable. So I think Isaiah came out of the season being a pretty good player, and I'm using a euphemism here. So when he was traded, that was a big piece because the pick itself, it wasn't a great draft. The Cavs ended up going with Colin Sexton, which has been okay, hasn't been great for them. Still young, so it could develop into something better. But I don't think the Celtics would have gone for him, even if they had their own pick. So the trade was pretty good. When I say they made a mistake, they made a mistake because it's a guy that came in and kind of, he's not the kind of guy that you want leading your team. And I think he's been showing that even this year in Brooklyn. He came over with Durant, but since Durant got injured, he was supposed to be leader of this team and he couldn't be. And the same happened with the Celtics. He came over, all these promises, everybody believed he was going to take us to the next level because the year before we almost got to the finals. The Cavs, now they had a older LeBron, no Kyrie anymore. They could have been, they could be beaten in the Eastern Conference Finals. The team ended up going to that game. They played against the Cavs again, but without Kyrie. Kyrie got injured. Terry Rozier stepped in. The young guys, Brown, Tatum, Horford, as the actual leader of that team, and Marcus Smart, they managed to get important wins. It's the Sixers. They beat the Bucks. So it's not like the path to the Eastern Conference Finals was easy for them, but they showed up and they did great. In the summer, Kyrie comes back. Tatum has to take a step back because Gordon Hayward is also back. Kyrie wants to be the leader of this team. He goes off when Tatum gets the last shot against Orlando last year. He comes out and says, I'm the guy here. I want to take these kind of shots. He doesn't get along with Brad Stevens. And eventually we saw what happened. The Celtics had a pretty bad season, went to the playoffs, lost against the Bucks. That was it. So overall, it's quite clear that he wasn't the guy. But now we gave it away. He's gone. No regrets here. We brought in Kemba Walker, who might not be as talented as Kyrie, but is definitely a better leader for this young team. He's a guy that comes in, knows where to get the shot away, it knows how to get buckets on its own. The team has been phenomenal. I think they were on a run before the season was stopped. Tatum was being amazing. His last month of February, March, incredible. He was doing, unbelievable stuff. We'll see how they come back after this break. But if there is something the Celtics can do very, very well, is beat the freaking 76ers. So if this series were to happen, I'm telling you, I get the Celtics, and I'm not taking them because I'm a homer. I'm taking them because in this game, without crowd, the Celtics have the advantage. They have the better players, especially if Embiid doesn't come back to his best level. And I think they will win this game 4-1. There it is, another episode comes to an end. We went over these matchups, 8 matchups for the NBA playoffs if they were to come back. We'll see what eventually happens. Of course, if this were the format the NBA is going to go for, we're going to cover them more when the games approach. But overall, it was fun to kind of project how the teams could do in this newly formed playoff bracket. Nonetheless, we'll see if we get much needed news about the NBA return at some point in the next few weeks. I think we're getting closer to getting an actual date for the for basketball to return. I don't know, the idea apparently is to end in November. We'll see. The problem with this kind of things, for football as well, is the fact that the later you restart, the later you're gonna finish, and that's gonna impact the next season as well. So it's probably gonna be tricky to get back to the classic NBA schedule starting in October, finishing in June. I think it's going to take a couple of years to get back there. But nonetheless, as long as we have basketball games, I'll be happy. I think, for our friends in North America, in Europe here, we have a lot of soccer going on now, a lot of football. But I know that people in North America are dying to get some live sports, and I hope they can get that as soon as possible. So that's all for today. We're gonna talk again on Friday. Of course, Bundesliga episode coming to preview the weekend. The other leagues are coming back as well. So as I talked about last episode, we're gonna be kind of restructuring the schedule. We'll see how much NBA we talk in the next month and a half, because there's gonna be a lot of games, a lot of leagues, and all of them. I want to cover them all. So the NBA might take a step back for a while, but as soon as the games return for them as well, which, as I said, probably going to be halfway through August, and whenever they come back, I'll go back covering them 100%. So if you're a fan of the NBA and you listen to the podcast for that reason, stay tuned, because we'll be back. Before we go, just real quick, if you want to drop me a follow on Instagram, we've got a new page that's at sports_with_Frank. Can follow on Twitter as well at sportswithfrank. And if you listen on Apple Podcasts, please, a 5-star review will be much appreciated, because it helps to get more and more people to see the podcast and listen to the podcast and expand the community. Apart from that, I will see you again on Friday. This was the Sports with Frank podcast. I've been Francesco. Stay safe, and I'll see you soon.